This latest chapter of Kagurabachi just introduced, in my opinion, one of the most interesting character dynamics that Hokuzono has decided to delve into, because genuinely, I think we should ask this question up until this point after seeing how much carnage has really been laid out throughout the 50 chapters or so of the series. Is Chihiro a monster? Literally, like, if we look at everything objectively, take away our bias with Chihiro being the main character, what separates someone like Hirohiko, a Hoshaku member who does not care about the people that he kills, to someone like Chihiro, a right now rogue swordsman who doesn't care who he kills in order to get the revenge he needs on his dad? What separates these two? Chihiro fighting for justice? Let's be real here. The world isn't black and white, or it may just be that very thing. How many people has Chihiro killed so far in the story of Kagurabachi? I think someone put down in my comment section a couple chapters ago, we were rolling into about 90 plus bodies that Chihiro has racked up, at the very least on screen, because we have to imagine there are definitely more that have hit his closet before we even carried in those 3-year time skip between his father's death and now. And at this point, since that chapter, I'm sure we've at least reached the hundreds. And like, sure, you could argue that the Hoshaku, the villains of the story, again, the antagonists who killed Chihiro's dad for absolutely no reason other than to absolutely destabilize the entire, not just political spectrum of the country, but just the vulnerability and weakness of the civilians and innocent people that can't defend themselves against enchanted blades with magical freaking powers. We saw what the Shinichi was capable of, right? If all of these swords get into the Hoshaku's hands and the wielders are then taken out in this arc, or at least 1 or 2 of them, if we're not able to break this deadlock that has lasted for the last 3 years, always being 1 step behind the Hoshaku, I mean, we are definitely going to be entering a big issue here. But again, if you think about it, Chihiro just running through these cities, no one knows who he is, destabilizing the mafia, destabilizing the people that are in power. Sure, you could argue he's doing it for good. He's definitely acting as a very Batman-esque, fighter of the night. But again, Chihiro kills people and asks questions later. And what happens when one of these people, these NPCs that Chihiro just slays, what happens to their families? What happens to their children? What happens to, again, we also have to remember that a lot of these people now that we're fighting in the Hoshaku are literally just people that are answering Indeed applications, something that we get into later in the story, believe it or not. We finally get an answer to that. So Hokuzono is definitely doing a great job and putting all of his focus on the narrative and plot of Kagurabachi, which I can't ask for anything more of. The overall scary thing that I'm trying to get at is Hirohiko, sure, is definitely being a dick when he's like, you and me are the exact same, bro. But the thing is how many people has Hirohiko killed? We obviously don't know that number, but the weirdest thing is, no matter how many people that may be, who knows at this point who has the higher kill count, right? It could be Chihiro for all we know. And I think that's the overall point that Hokuzono is trying to make here. And I think that's even something that we see in Seiichi Somura from last chapter, who is just an absolute badass and invincible. He brings the blind swordsman trope to a whole new level as like blind Batman with like echolocation. That's twice that I've had to reference Batman in this chapter review, which just goes to show you the amount of efficiency these characters are hitting these nameless NPCs with. Even Somura understands that he may be responsible and guilty of wanton killing, even though he's again fighting for quote unquote justice, what he believes is right, which you should always feel the right to do. You should, in my opinion, I mean, look, you gotta stand for what you believe in. I'm never going to argue that whatsoever, but it is interesting that the story is again bringing up this nuance here of, even though, sure, you're fighting for what you deem as right, as in general, is killing ever moral? Can killing ever be moral? But either way, while the temple is safe in Somura's hands for right now, and Hikori is focused on recovering, being able to enact their plan of getting their enchanted blades back, Chihiro and Hirohiko are finally able to start their fight that we have been waiting for, I feel like, a couple chapters now. At least that's what Hirohiko would want you to think. and Chihiro, because he immediately just turns into little bits of paper and floats away and teleports away after having his little dynamic with Chihiro. And he just leaves his little crystal NPCs to take care of Chihiro. But you know what? At this point, after what I've just already said and the amount of chapters we've gone through, we know that if you don't have a name, you are just gonna get diced up in 1 to 2 slashes. I mean, no matter how intricate and convoluted your character design is, if Hokuzono doesn't name you, you're cooked, bud. Now, immediately having Hirohiko just teleport away and just procrastinate the fight made me feel like, oh my god, no way is Chihiro just gonna slay some random nerds this chapter and we're not gonna get the fight again. What is gonna be so good about this fight that Hokuzono does not want to show us this? Have you noticed that whenever there's something great, like seeing Shiba fight on screen, or something like this, it's like, we're gonna get to it. Oh, we have to wait. But you know what? This isn't the case. This isn't the case. And I was genuinely very happy to see it, because Hirohiko is someone that he bides his time. He has no need to take down Chihiro right away. I mean, if you really remember it, their goal isn't necessarily to even take down Enten, even though he admits that it wasn't a bluff, that he has the potential and power around him to do so. I think one of the most interesting things in regards to this chapter, and the reason why Hirohiko doesn't want to fight Chihiro right away, is to further prove his point. Chihiro denies the fact that he would be the same as a heinous criminal like Hirohiko. But if you really think about it, as I mentioned before, there's not too much that separates that. And I think Hirohiko would rather spend his time, even though he gets revealed that he's cut with his stomach, he's actually bleeding out. I don't know if he's on borrowed time or if this is just like a flesh wound and it doesn't matter to him. It's enough for the person that's sitting next to him in the theater he decides to hold out on while his remote paper origami attacks are hitting Chihiro and messing with his trajectory and his senses as he's fighting the Datenseki crystal NPCs. The main argument that Hirohiko is trying to make here is going a little bit more into it. Hirohiko admits that from the age of 3, he's learned that killing was always an option to get what he wanted. And from that point on, when he realized that, he knew that no other child around him was the same as him. No other kid his age would see the world through his eyes. And that is until today when he meets Chihiro. Sure, the Hishaku members are all people that probably see things the way he does, but they all seem to be adults way older than him. Hirohiko wasn't even present during the attack on Chihiro's father, so he is at the very least a newer Hishaku member, which is the perfect matchup between these two characters, because before the age of 18, not only was Hirohiko's hands stained with blood, but so was Chihiro's. For a character that for a long time felt that he had no peer, he had no other person his age to feel the same with, Hirohiko is just glad that he can share this bond with Chihiro. And I think there's some merit to that. But before that point hits home, we actually do get a brief little touch base on the Datenseki crystals and how the experience of the wielder absolutely matters. We went from thinking that every single Datenseki crystal user had the power of an enchanted blade wielder, or at least something close to that. But it turns out, actually, that's not always the case. Because they've had so many randos, as Hirohiko literally puts it, that have just signed up on Indeed and they're just taking whoever applies, a lot of these characters have never really fought that well. And, you know, you could take all the steroids you want. If you don't know how to fight, you could get your ass beat by someone smaller very easily that knows what they're doing. And I think that's what Hirohiko is pointing on at this moment. And I love that, because it proves that even though they can just distribute all of these crystals to as many people as they want, they can't necessarily compare with someone like Chihiro specifically, who's been through 100 bodies at this point and is easily able to deal with whatever fighter comes his way, especially if they're not quick enough with the beat. But these people are selected sorcerers, so they're even more experienced wielders of the Datenseki crystal, which is why Chihiro has a little bit more of a problem with them. But not too much of a problem, because he is still able to immediately dome all of these people, disembowel, and just take out all of their limbs and just every word you can think of in just a couple sword slashes as per usual. So even selected sorcerers of the Hishaku are nothing to a real enchanted blade wielder like the Enten like Chihiro Rokuhira. So that's good to know. It makes me a lot more confident that they're going to be able to break this 3-year deadlock. Before Chihiro slams through the ceiling though, something that I think is interesting to harp on is the short little play that Hirohiko does go to see. Apparently it's the story of the hero Sasuke, where the hero Sasuke slays a black ogre and returns peace to the land and saves his family from harm. But I think one of the most interesting things about this is it could be potential foreshadowing, because Hirohiko mentions that it's dull. It's boring. The hero wins too easily. That's not a good story. That's not something fun to read. So that's the first layer, is that this isn't going to be your average Chihiro saves the day and everything is good and we get the happy ending story. At least we can hope so. Disney Kagurabachi isn't happening, so don't start saying those words today, community. Another way that we could look at this though, Hirohiko mentions the black ogre, the bad guy of the story, right? Does eventually get killed by the swordsman Sasuke. But the black ogre, I think, is a really good foreshadowing for Chihiro as well, if we are to go with this whole monster narrative that Hokuzono is beginning to craft. Because as Chihiro rips through the ceiling and kills all the people, and decapitated heads are falling down onto the stage in front of all these just normal passerby who are just trying to have a nice show and are now traumatized for the rest of their freaking lives, they all run in terror. They're screaming their heads off and freaking out. The only person that's sitting there very calm and cool is Hirohiko, who goes, you know, you look like a monster to the ordinary human, showing up with multiple dead bodies and looking like you just, like Dante in the beginning of Devil May Cry 4, if you understand that reference. Like, no matter what, if you don't have the context to what's going on, you're scared. But again, we bring up the point of, even if you have context, is Chihiro not a monster for the violence that he commits almost daily at this point? Something that really does make me enjoy the character development between these two is, let me walk you through a fake scenario here. This isn't real. This is all, you could even consider this headcanon, but I wouldn't, even because I don't believe this. Let's say Hirohiko, someone who had to kill from an early age. What if the reason that Hirohiko had to kill from an early age is because a Kamunabi agent slaughtered his dad in front of him? And from that moment, Hirohiko was left to the streets and had to fight on his own and resort to thievery and resort to killing people. And eventually, he could never be a normal child because of the hardships he faced going forward. And the Hashaku, who are sure a criminal organization, give Hirohiko the option to take revenge on the people that killed his dad and made his life so damn fucking hard. What is the difference there between that fake Hirohiko backstory and Chihiro's backstory? Sure, you could argue the Hashaku are a criminal organization and the Kamunabi are the political organization of the country. But again, we have to think here. We've met the Kamunabi higher-ups already. They don't really seem like the most great, peaceful people, right? They're a little corrupt. I mean, kid killing definitely isn't above any of the Kamunabi. So just because they're the world government and they commit the same crimes as the Hashaku might, because again, a lot of the Kamunabi wanted to kill Rokuhira once the war was done and wanted to end the threat of the enchanted blade wielders forever, or not even end the threat, but take the enchanted blades for themselves. What is the difference here? Just a fun little thought experiment that I think really hits the point home of what Hokuzono is trying to tell us in this chapter, that no matter what side you're on, and again, even this harks back and was echoed by, I'm sorry for that, I apologize, Seiichi Somura's point of, sure, you know, you guys are going to hell for wanton killing, but I guess that would make me also a resident of hell myself. At the end of the day, the only person that can actually understand Chihiro in life, and we even do see this with Hikori, while being a great friend and great ally to Chihiro, isn't really someone that can, I guess now he can with his fucked up, you know, childhood and life, but Hikori's never really had to stain his hands with blood, at least until this very last moment. Whereas this character is able to relate to Chihiro at a much deeper level, no matter how much Chihiro wants to deny it. I mean, even at the end here, you have Chihiro being like, yeah, well, it's your guys' fault that I'm like this. You forced me to be this way. When, again, did they force him Did they put Enten in his hand and say, come and kill us? I mean, even if they did do that, does Chihiro not have the power to walk away? I'm not saying that that's the correct decision. I'm not saying that Chihiro needs to be a reincarnation of Buddha and, denounce all of his material and worldly desires like Somura is trying to and just give up on revenge. I want to see Chihiro obtain that revenge, but I think it's important to remember the kind of monster that revenge requires you to be. And with that, I'm definitely excited to see how this fight continues between these two characters that, as much as one of them wants to deny it, are destined to meet and destined to relate to each other by fate. Even Sojo, I think, was a precursor to this, giving Chihiro a reason to not think his philosophy of his father's swords was the only philosophy to exist. Sojo gave Chihiro the nuance that, you know what, maybe I'm not the only one that can properly wield my father's swords. And at the end of the day, his father even gave him this lesson that these are weapons of death and people are going to use them for whatever purpose they see fit. And every single enchanted blade wielder will have their own reason for taking up the blade. Chihiro needed to learn that lesson. So I'm very interested to see what Chihiro learns from the mirror image of himself. Hirohiko could just as very well have ended up the same as Chihiro and vice versa. So I think that's what to expect next chapter. As far as Hirohiko's origami powers, I'm interested to see how they work in a one-on-one fight. That's all I'll say. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end here, it really means the world to me. Hit that like button if you enjoyed. And please, please don't forget to subscribe if you want to see any future Kagurabachi videos or weekly reviews or any other series that you might read. Check them out. And if you want to see some more polished video essay type content, don't forget that the main channel exists if you want some stuff to watch when you're bored. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.